DA is heading to court to get access to details of employment agreements with Cuban workers. Government has spent around 1.4 billion rand on these workers over the last 10 years. The official opposition says this is unacceptable in a country with soaring unemployment figures. Let's discuss the PI or Promotion of Access to Information Act application with the DA MP, who is Dean Macpherson. Dean, thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate it. What kind of information are you seeking with this Promotion of Access to Information Act?
Well, thanks, Clement. I think that that there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered around the spending and procurement of Cuban services, 1.4 billion rand over the last decade. The scant detail that those departments that have spent money on Cuban services, this has only come to light through questions that we have submitted to various departments, and they seem to be cagey on exactly how this was procured, under what mandate it was done so, and why those services weren't available within South Africa. So we don't know the scope of the work, we don't know how long these contracts are continuing for, and we also don't know who gets the money at the end of the day. Is it the Cuban state? Is it the employees that they send to us? And many other questions that we need to fully understand so that South Africans can determine for themselves whether this sort of money could have been spent on South African employees, or whether in fact it is justified to be spending 1.4 billion rand on Cuban services. Yeah,
and I know in the past, as the DA, you have questioned whether this is some ideological friendship that our government has with Cuba. But if our own workers in South Africa are unable to be given the opportunities, and some of the skills are outsourced when they are readily available in the country, obviously that is quite concerning. I want us to break it down, Dean, the departments that have gotten services from Cuba. And if I'm missing any out, maybe you can come in there. The Minister of Water and Sanitation, Lindiwe Sisulu, told us about 24 Cuban engineers that were brought in to improve government's efforts on water delivery and related services. We're talking 64 million rand here. Solidarity had actually launched a court bid to stop their deployment. And then we also heard from the cash-strapped Defense Department, right? This is the department that has constantly told us that it's suffering from budget cuts, it doesn't have money. They spent 1 billion rand on Cuban service providers for maintenance and repair of key equipment over the past 7 years or so. Which other departments actually spent money which then totals this 1.4 billion rand?
Well, Clement, the Department of Basic Education spent 63 million rand on Cuban teachers. The Health Department spent 83 million rand on the Cuban Medical Brigade. And Public Works spent 137 million rand in supporting Cuban services. Now, we're all for global solidarity, and that's an important point. But it can never come at the expense of solidarity with South Africa's own problems, and those being the unemployment crisis that we face. I find it quite frankly bizarre that the Defense Department would spend 1 billion rand outsourcing the maintenance of military vehicles and military aircraft to a foreign country. Who in their right mind does that, except in South Africa? Now, I find it hard to believe that we don't have people within our own borders and to maintain our own sovereignty that could maintain military hardware and equipment like vehicles and aeroplanes and other services within the Defence Force. So I, and certainly the DA, we think that there's a lot more to the story. In fact, we know from various reports that Cuba itself faces a foreign currency crisis, in that it desperately needs foreign currency. And so what they do is they outsource and they effectively sell their services to countries around the world to try and generate that foreign currency, which of course is one of the questions that we have, is exactly how much goes to the employees and how much ends up in the state coffers. Because if in fact it is being used as a smokescreen to generate foreign hard currency for Cuba. In literal terms, that's called money laundering. And that's obviously something that South Africa cannot be party to.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people, some people are looking at this and thinking government is jumping at every opportunity to send money to Cuba. Let's not even forget, Dean, let's not forget about the medical drug that the SANDF actually purchased from Cuba. That came at a cost of 200 million rand, and the procurement was not only irregular, but the drug wasn't even registered with our health regulatory authority. Again, that raises the relationship between South Africa and Cuba. It looks like, as I said earlier, government jumping at opportunities to send money to that country.
Well, don't forget, Clement, that we spent R500 million on the Cuban medical brigade to come and assist us during the worst of the pandemic. And yet I and many other MPs and constituencies got phone calls from doctors that cannot find placement or work within the Department of Health. And that is just such an egregious example that we would outsource our medical responsibilities to another country when doctors cannot be placed. And you'd be hard-pressed to find Cuban doctors in any facilities. And in fact, I've heard many stories, and many others will be able to corroborate this, that we have to partner doctors with Cuban doctors to be able to do their work. We know that from the engineering issue around the Department of Water and Sanitation, that these engineers, Cuban engineers, aren't registered or able to practice in the country, and yet they're being paid vast sums of money, far more than we would pay engineers within South Africa. So if the government wants to support Cuba, let them be upfront about it, and let them do so in a way that doesn't compromise our fiscal responsibilities, our responsibilities to generate employment within South Africa. But don't couch it in a form of global solidarity when in fact it's actually the very opposite, at South African workers' expense.
Yeah, look, Dean, the question is government using taxpayers' funding to bankroll an ideological friendship? And let's hope you'll get some answers when you get the information that you are applying for through this Promotion of Access to Information Act. Thank you so much for making time. The DA's MP Dean Macpherson.